Vishnu, how you doing, man? It's good to see you, buddy.
I'm good. It's Tuesday. It's not Tuesday.
It's not Tuesday, man.
It's been a long week.
Yeah?
Yeah, we're really going through it here at the college. It's final season. It's Thanksgiving season, and it's also I need to go to a bed season and take a long nap. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. End of the year is always like the worst. I mean, it's not the worst. They could be good, but finals and shit, man.
I think I think there's like a temperature, not like a literal physical temperature, but I think things are starting to settle down before the holidays, which means that everything is getting crammed into the spaces right before the holidays. So people are feeling more rushed. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so weird. Like, I don't really, like, I cram for finals and stuff, but I miss the days where it was like November and everybody's kind of stressed about Black Friday, where it's like, now it's more worrying about biology exams and stuff, and I would kind of rather worry about like fighting over like that 36-inch flat screen and like getting shanked in the yard over it, you know?
Listen. If you're going out on Black Friday every dang year and buying a new TV, what is wrong with the TV that you bought last year? That's all I gotta say.
Bigger is better, man, and you can put a TV in every single room. TV in the bedroom, TV like in the bathroom. You could get you the big TV mounted on the wall, like get you that dual screen action going on.
I'm not running a dual monitor setup in my bathroom, bro. There's not enough ventilation, and that's the only thing.
Yeah, I didn't think about the ventilation. You know, like that's what the vent's for. You know, you ever go in the bathroom to, like, take a shit, and like you're going in there and you're like you fucking with the lights, but somebody's switch is inverted. So you know when you first walk in the bathroom and it's like fan to the door and then the light, and like you really got to shit, but you're spending like 10 minutes trying to figure out how to turn the goddamn light on, and everybody knows, damn, that guy's in there taking a shit. He's fucking with the lights.
Make light switches easy again. That's what I gotta say.
Yeah.
One switch to rule them all.
One switch to rule them all.
Yeah.
And one switch to bind them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Type shit.
Am I allowed to swear?
Well, I mean, I don't censor you here, man, so it's just whatever you want your public image to be. I've already racked up a couple.
Ooh. Well, okay. We'll start swearing then, I guess. I swear a little. So, where should we start? I remember before we started planning this, we were talking about like what are my interests, and then I know you had a couple notes written down. So where do you kind of want to start?
Yeah, man. Well, I just like one of the big things I like about having guests, or the idea of having guests, is just showing the world to people that I think are super interesting, that have a lot of interesting things to offer the world. And as soon as I started talking to you about it, we started talking about like just cool different historical things. You mentioned like Puerto Rico. You mentioned drug history. You mentioned like all kind of crazy stuff. We talked about the Tuskegee experiments, man. So like
there's a lot of fucked up history out there.
It's all
there really
fucked
is.
up,
it's all mostly fucked up, but sometimes it's a little bit funny. Like, this is almost mainstream knowledge now, but back in the 1930s and 1920s, Australia had a really big emu problem. Mm-hmm. They were overturning towns. So the Australian military is like, okay, how do we stop these 6 foot tall, 800 pound plus birds? So their idea was, let's put a big fucking gun on a medium-sized vehicle and see how many of them we can take out. Can you guess who won the Emu War?
Was it the Australians?
It was not the ones with the guns. It was the ones with the beaks. Trust. But the agricultural culture of Australia doesn't just end with how much they hate the birds. They pretty much hate everything that lives there. So, at another point in Australian agricultural history, this is really interesting stuff, by the way, they were having a cane toad problem.
Oh, shit.
So how do you get rid of toads? You bring in different animals to try to take them out. So this whole thing happens where they keep introducing different species that aren't native to the land, and then the species that they introduce keep messing everything up on the larger ecological scale. So now it's just infested and barren land, and all that grows there is kangaroos and tumbleweeds. Don't quote me on that.
All that's in Australia's kangaroos and tumbleweeds. Man, you know, Australia is a terrifying place, man, and they film all these crazy movies like, what's it? Who makes Avatar? James Gunn, James Cameron? Who is
James
it?
Cameron.
James Cameron, yeah. James Cameron makes Avatar, spending all this money on CGI. I'm like, dude, you could go to Australia and film some shit. It'd fuck you up, bro. It's like, it looks like Vietnam over there every day with them emus, bro.
I could not fathom waking up in Australia.
People do it every day. They wake up in Australia, and it's just they just live like that. I'm an Australian now.
They do?
Yeah, like you
People
see
are just
the
Australian?
giant spider webs, bro. they got over
Oh,
there.
dude, no. Miss me with any of that.
You just wake
Any
up
of
and a
that.
spider web's just on top of your house. Like,
No.
fuck a squatter. I'll take a squatter any day over 100 million spiders on my shit, bro.
Yeah, no. I'm not cut out for Australia. It's a little bit too hardcore over there for me. Close second, Florida. I think Florida could be just the right amount of deadly and charming.
Florida's kind of like our Australia, though, man. I mean, they got, like, you seen where they have the lizards, like the iguanas, and they get frozen, they fall out of
Fall
the
out of
tree
the
and knock
trees.
you in the head.
Yeah, I think that is so funny. That is such a uniquely Florida thing to happen. Florida is such an interesting place, especially now, because Disney owns like the middle part of all of Florida and is basically its own state within a state.
Mm-hmm.
And that could lead to so many different repercussions, because if the state of Florida recognizes Disney as a sovereign place, then they can start making up their own laws, and basically they have their own utilities there already because they need it. And the state of Florida does not want that, because that would mean they make less money from Disney. So Florida definitely comes with its own challenges.
So it kind of sounds like the Vatican a little bit, you know, instead of like a pope and all that weird stuff they got over there, you kind of just got a mouse. It's just like, I'm taking Orlando. It's mine.
That is a very good way to put it. Florida and Disney are basically Italy and the Vatican,
That's our
and Mickey
Vatican.
Mouse is the Pope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of Catholicism, we worship Disney, and that's our holy land, Florida. I mean, it happens, man. I mean,
It's
all the
Holy
movies are
Land.
Disney, Star Wars, Marvel.
It's like gentrification, but for mass-consumed media.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a story in my head about right. Okay. So I wanted to bring it up to like Disney and like mass consumerism, because do you know how advertising was invented?
No, I don't. Actually.
It was a trick question. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's a good question. No, I never really thought about it.
So basically, advertising was invented in, of all places, Britain.
You.
So there was this guy, and he was having really good luck selling things to men. But then along the way, he comes up with this idea, hey, I'm only reaching half of the population that lives here. How do we attract the other half? So he starts advertising to women. But what he found out, in advertising to women, he increased revenue sales based from like male shoppers. So that kind of created this, how do we get people to be motivated to buy our things and make them think that they want to buy our things? The easiest way to get to a man is through his wife.
Okay.
Yeah. Moral of the story, women run the world.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that, and I agree. And like one thing I think about a lot and I talk about a lot is how I think it's interesting how when you look at men's clothes, they're pretty designed for comfort sometimes, but when you look at things in women's like clothing history and fashion history that are designed by men, that are just kind of designed for those beauty standards, but not typically what's comfortable.
It says a lot about the world, because the world is inherently a gendered place. Because of the patriarchal like structure of things are more designed for men. Like if you look at a car, cars aren't designed for women. It's not built for anything that they have. And in a lot of cases, being a woman in a car is a lot more deadly than being a man in a car. So there's this whole series of car designers who are like, hey, women, how can we make a car for you? No, this is a true thing. Mm-hmm. So Honda made a Honda Fit for women that came with only 3 colors to match their lipstick and purses. Kind of sexist, but I see the vibes. It was designed by a woman. And then Volkswagen did the same thing, but it was this more comfy ride that allowed women to feel more safe and had more safety features. And that kind of trickled into how modern cars receive their safety features. So again, when you give platform to women, things change. And a little bit of a segue from that, let's talk about the forced sterilization of Puerto Rico.
Oh, man, yeah, let's do it. We were talking about that earlier when I tried to plan out the times for this podcast, and I live for this kind of stuff, man, so let's get into that.
So, well, let me kind of clarify like where I'm coming from here. When I was in college, I did a couple women and gender studies classes. I did a lot of communication classes, and one of my professors is also a women and gender studies professor. So she like encapsulated a lot of that study into the study of communication. But on the flip side of that, I was also taking a lot of classes on like race and race relations. And that kind of led me to one of the lectures that the racism teacher had. That sounded wrong. She didn't teach me racism. She taught me that how racism spreads. Mm-hmm. But basically, back when we had just acquired Puerto Rico post-war, like this is like the 50s, 60s. So America had a big problem, right? How do we keep other people from procreating? Because the fear was that if people of color.
Hey, it's a lot better than what they would have called them, man.
It's true. I think it's better to use the term that is designated. But
yeah, no, I
so
agree.
America, I thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. But America had this big problem with people of color intermingling and mixing with white people because that's kind of how racism evolved. Like it's the idea of other, and then there's a role of like morality into it. Like, well, I'm more morally right than you because I have fairer skin. And that kind of plays throughout history. So fast forward, we're back in Puerto Rico. It's the 50s. People are having fun. It is right in the middle of the Cold War. So America is trying to figure out, we have this new island. How do we make it to where it is majority white? So the first thing you do is cut off access to education. Then you cut off healthcare rights. And then in the process of cutting off those healthcare rights, bring women under false pretense and say, hey, we're going to make you feel better. But in reality, they're performing hysterectomies and forced sterilizations. But it gets even better. So you start taking away the women's right, like a woman's right to have a child, because you don't want any more of those brown little babies walking around. So then people can't live there anymore. They start leaving, mass exodus. Then all of a sudden, all these big American companies come in and start buying up all this fucking land. And this is kind of why Puerto Rico is considered like a destination trip, because America owns it and businesses there run on the American dollar, right? So that was started because people started leaving Puerto Rico. They would come in, buy all this land, and start developing it for white people to be there. So again, you see like this, we don't want you here because you look like this, and we deserve to be here because the color of our skin. Mm-hmm. So it's really kind of interesting to see how different facets of American culture kind of interplay with our historical negatives, is what I'm going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's weird. And I had a semester where I took an African American studies class and a social psychology class at the same time. And one of the core things that I learned in social psychology that was when resources are divided is merely when we see a lot of groupthink and when we see a lot of prejudice, because it makes it easier for groups of people to other one another. And like you see it happen all the time in war whenever they start coming up with different slangs and different things for one another, so it justifies going over and killing the people that look different than you. So if you live in a country where it's to the point now where it's like there's so many people in 2025, everybody in America who do have as many resources and they're poor, and it's like it makes it easier to hate one another because you got a whole bunch of poor Bible Belt conservatives that also don't really have anything.
Yeah.
Being told they gotta hate the progressives who also don't have anything.
Exactly.
Instead of helping one another. And it's when you mentioned that formula, and I think it's really interesting, and I hope it sounds familiar of in America, we're kind of doing the same thing right now when it's like, what did you say? Cutting education. What else? Getting rid of healthcare. That's what the whole freaking shutdown was about, was this whole United Healthcare thing.
Yeah.
And then harming women's reproductive rights. I mean, can't get an abortion, can't feel safe with your own reproductive rights for the first time in forever. They figured out this formula, targeting it on disenfranchised groups because you could have got away with it for so long. And now they can just do it to all of America. And one thing I learned in a lot of those classes was how eugenics really played into like American history, like in the 30s and 40s. And people who like Theodore Roosevelt, people who he like were like books that writing about how eugenics was the future of America and the West. And these are people who were like
mildly respected, to say the least.
And yeah, and they were like, yeah,
I think
influential figures in our society at the time.
I think it's kind of going back to that echo chamber groupthink thing, right? Groupthink thing. So if you can figure out how to divide, this is going to sound super communist. If you can figure out how to divide the proletariat, which is the working class, people who aren't using other people's labor to get rich, if you can divide them amongst themselves, they become easier to control. And if you can pit them against themselves, they'll kill each other off. That way, there's this whole hierarchy of, well, we're not going to hurt each other because we have a mutual interest of money, but the poors should hurt each other because then we can make money off of that. And then pitting people against one another through like devious thought experiments is not a new thing. It goes back to like the dawn of man, right? So a relatively recent example would be the Crusades. Basically, it was kind of where wartime propaganda was formed, because you have these crusaders and you have these priests and monks going down and like recording their experiences in the Middle East. And sometimes there's like some accuracy to it, but a lot of times there's more embellishment. So a particular time that there was a lot of embellishment was a monk or a priest or whatever saw that as a form of execution / torture, the Arabs in the local region would like tie a dude up by his intestines and then wrap it around him. But in reality, it really probably was not that bad, and it was all in an effort because at a certain point during the Crusades, the Christians were losing pretty bad, right? So they needed a reason to get more support from the church, more money from the church. So they started coming up with these ideas, and then that's how like this whole thing kind of was started. Because if you start spreading lies about a culture that you don't understand, and that gets disseminated through the telephone game, through the rest of a society, you start developing like hateful natures. But to relate that to like America and modern politics, you can basically say whatever you want. We're on a podcast right now. We're saying things. This is our First Amendment right? But when it comes to the power of speech and the power of persuasion, there's a lot more to be said about how critically people think about their message. So an example of this is going to be controversial. Are you familiar with Rosa Parks?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, tell me what you know.
I know that she was on the bus and she didn't get up off the bus. You know, everything they teach you in like your grade school years about Rosa Parks. I don't really have that much more of an advanced knowledge of her besides that general story that everybody hears in their civil rights, like African American history classes. They decide to only talk about it for like a week in grade school, and then we don't talk about it no more. So,
I think that's a very good point that you make, because we spend such little time on that era of history in grade school that the only time to fully appreciate and learn from that experience is in higher ed. But the reason I bring up Rosa Parks is because in order to pit people against each other again, America, the whole culture did this one really fun trick. So you have Claudette Colvin, who was a 15-year-old black woman in the South. Mm-hmm. But since she was 15 and...
Your motion sensor lights.
Are they really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's okay. It's all live.
But so Claudette Colvin is this very little known civil rights... Oh, what the heck? We'll cut most of that out.
We won't. It's all live, all real.
Okay. Okay, where was I? Claudette Colvin, 15-year-old, very little known activist, but she was the original Rosa Parks, so to speak. So the reason we don't learn about Claudette Colvin is there's a lot of different aspects of why that Claudette wouldn't be the ideal figurehead for any sort of black liberation movement. Mm-hmm. So she was unmarried and pregnant. So that instantly meant that everyone disliked her. Black people disliked her. White people disliked her. Everyone dislikes a unmarried pregnant person, especially if it's 1950 and they're black.
Isn't that sad? Because that's like the most important person, you would think.
That's what I'm saying.
Couldn't imagine any other type of person that would need more attention, love, and resources.
So you kind of lose track of all these like smaller figures because of how different trains of thought are portrayed to the public, right? If you want to set a certain image of yourself, use the ideal version of whatever you want to portray. The only reason I bring that up is because we kind of have this theme of like powerful women or like women run the world type thing. So it's just interesting to note how even within the experience of womanhood that there is still such an action that was able to be done. And I'm not trying to be performative is the word I'm going to use. Or speak on behalf of women worldwide. It's the stuff in textbooks that they don't teach you is what matters. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't tell stories and you don't have a persuasive appeal, then why should anyone listen to anybody? Mm-hmm. Right? So if you have something to say, it should be important, ethical, and honest, whatever you say.
I get that. I always try to say what I think is best at the time, and I always try to tell people, like, because nobody is a full expert on anything, and people, like, a lot of times whenever we make content like this, they'll see a podcast and either disagree with it or know some other knowledge, or just completely take what people say on a podcast and they'll take it as gospel instead of doing their own research. And it's like, I don't know. And that might just be more of the internet culture and the bots trying to get people to argue and stuff. But that's one thing that I like about this podcast movement is we can have these discussions. You just educated me on something I knew nothing about. So now I can walk out into the world as a more educated person on something like that that's clearly affecting our country now. And like, what really bothers me is there's so many conversations with people, and I try to be open-minded. I try to understand that everybody's on their own journey, but there's some times where I get when people get a little upset when people are not on the same path that they might be on, let's say intellectually or just knowledge-based wise. They're not as worldly. Because there's been conversations where I've had with people who don't know what the Tuskegee experiments are, who don't know things like MK Ultra, or they think things like Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. You're crazy. And I'm like, okay, so you're going to college for 4 years and you're about to graduate, for example, and you've never heard of the Tuskegee experiments. You gotta take all your degree makes you take math, all these kind of things that you might not use, but you're gonna graduate not knowing what the Tuskegee experiments is. So what looks better in the academic space? Because once these college kids, once we graduate and we be in the world, we're gonna go vote. And it kind of makes me sad that there's adults out there voting who don't know about this kind of stuff. And they just trust that our government is looking out for us.
Remember, folks, the next time you think that the government wouldn't do that, they certainly did. I kind of want to make it a little bit more lighthearted now. I think we're getting a little bit like theoretical. So I'm going to give us one more fun little fact. So here at the College of Charleston, we have what is called the Special Collections Department. So for us, that's on the 3rd floor of our library. Beautiful space. If you've never been to Charleston, don't come here. It sucks. I'm kidding. We love it here. But so it's on the 3rd floor of the library. It is a earthquake-proof room. It's a flood-proof room, and it like the vault itself is earthquake-proof, flood-proof, and like sonic attack proof, right? So I have a couple friends in there, and they're right now working on the LGBTQ collection. So one of the most interesting things that I read while I was visiting the special collections was that Charleston was home to the first interracial and trans marriage. Really? So yeah, I got to recall exactly the details. So there is this trans woman who was fairly like well known because at the time, like being trans was trans in the South, no less, was this whole big thing. She had 1 billion articles written out about her. But so she's working for her future husband. So while she's in the process of working for her future husband, who is actively married to someone else, they fall in love and they get married. So, whenever a relationship is founded on someone else cheating on their other partner, it doesn't go well. So they're married for a good while. And then her husband, he was a black man. So that is kind of like the big shocker piece. Like a white trans woman is married to a black man who was fairly successful for the time. He was, I forget his name, but he was a fairly well-known artist. But they go through this like relationship together. And then at the end of it, when they go their separate ways, like the marriage didn't work out, he moves to like New York and goes insanely crazy. And that's the last we hear of him. But the surviving family members of these two were smart enough to collect all of their like newspaper clippings and give it to the college. And it feeds into a larger part of when you have the privilege of going to a place of higher education, it is an honor to be able to learn about experiences that are different from your own and to conceptualize them and then to utilize them in the current era. So there's certainly lessons we can learn here from that story. Like, don't cheat on your wife, and don't marry an artist. Or if you're going to be trans and black in the 70s, don't do it in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy place to start, huh?
I mean, it really was. I mean, that's such a bold move. I think there's been a lot of bold moves recently. That's why I was kind of attracted to that story. I think nowadays people are really attracted to shock value, or, you know, being seen as some sort of, I don't want to say like martyr, but it's more like, look at me, I'm going against the norm. But is going against the norm, in the process of going against the norm, is it done the right way? Right? If you want to study all these things and learn about all these experiences and speak on these experiences and tell people these stories, is it being done the right way?
You know, there was a big problem with that, like, in the spiritual community, and, like, because now we got the whole New Age spiritual movement, and we got, everybody wants to be a witch, everybody wants a pair of tarot cards, everybody wants to go to Earthbound and get all the stuff they need to start their spiritual journey in one trip. They want to get the clothes, they want to get the everything, and it had a lot of, like, there was a lot of division in that community, because for a while there's like this tradition, I don't know if you're familiar, but you weren't allowed to buy your own tarot cards. You could buy them in a store, but it was frowned upon, and it would be seen that the connection wouldn't be as strong. They had to be gifted to them by someone who already had practice with divinity,
Right.
who was already in that realm, and it kind of kept that like mystical, almost cultural tradition to it that made it to where, because this cannot be an accepted faith or practice in the West, you can't really, it's still, if you go and somebody asks you anywhere, any kind of social event, oh, what are you? You tell them, oh, I'm a witch. You're not going to get treated the same if you're like a Catholic, and so it became capitalized. It became, go do it at the store, go buy your tarot cards, go get a Ouija board, and it's, you know, there's all kind of different opinions about it, and even the whole not being able to buy your own tarot cards thing, there's even division among that. There's even people that said that tradition came to keep it gatekeepy once it made it to, like...
I could see that.
Yeah, you know? And it is a little frustrating, though, because it's kind of hard to trust and see who's really into it and knowledgeable.
That is a very fine distinction that you've made. The other side of that conversation is when you start monopolizing and capitalizing on subcultures like that, you run the risk of oversaturating any sort of market. And this is, coming into this podcast, I knew what I was going to talk about. I knew I was going to talk about some very subaltern knowledge type things. So to keep everything consistent, there's, like I've said, there's this like whole theme of women and power and advertising and how the world has formed over time to be both hateful and loving, honoring yet disobeying. But my favorite example of this interesting dichotomy is literally Salem. So if you go to Salem now, it is all witch culture.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if you were there in the 1700s?
They would throw you in the river, and if you sank, you weren't a witch, and if you floated, she's a witch, and let's burn her.
That's a deep cut right there. For all of you young heads out there, that is a Monty Python reference. Look it up. Your parents know.
They did do that, though.
Yeah, that's certainly fucked up. But also, like, the idea that if a person was set on fire and burned and they felt pain, they are a witch, but it could only be a woman or a man that someone hated is crazy to me. I think there's such a cognitive dissonance when it comes to how people feel about a certain thing at any given time. Because, I mean, like you said, in the 1700s, anyone that was accused of being a witch, you're done. But now you have Etsy witches.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have this mass popularization of divining and doing all of these like spiritual traditions. But you go to Salem and it's Disneyland, but for witches and people that are really into the Halloween before Christmas or the night before Christmas or whatever. I forget the name of the movie, but
have
stuff
you
like that.
Seen the theories about how they were all tripping balls because their wheat had a fungus ergot in it?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's like a very close derivative of LSD.
Yeah.
And it's also what the Romans, they found traces of that in their spiritual wine containers. Because the Romans were like, all of these cultures and a lot of significant events have psychedelic
Oh, certainly.
ties to their history. Especially there's a big, like, there's different research that suggests different things on that one. So I've seen multiple different opinions on that. And that's one theory I've seen. I've seen a lot of things about toxoplasmosis with the witch trials. It's a virus that transmits through rats. So it lives in the testicles of a rat, and it makes a rat sexually attracted to cats, so the virus could spread. So they start trying to mate with a cat, and obviously a rat walks up to it, he's going to just slime him out.
Yeah.
That's a quick meal.
Yep.
And then it goes to humans, and what this virus does is it lives in the minds of humans, and it numbs the temporal lobe, it decreases judgment, and they're finding it in people like motorcycle
JFK.
people who like...
No, RFK. They found it in RFK.
Oh, that's a brain worm he has. But he might have toxoplasmosis. If you have an indoor-outdoor cat, you probably have...
I don't know, man. He's going around picking up
Toxoplasmosis.
bears and shit.
Doing what with bears?
Did you not hear about this?
No, what do you do with the bear?
So this was like early 2000s, like late 90s. He was in Central Park in New York, and he sees like a dead bear, and he's like, well, I can't let the bear go to waste. So, and this is a real thing. He picks up dead animals and then puts them in this van. And it's gonna get published in a book by the woman that he was having an affair with. But she said his van smelled of dead animals. So this is like a common thing for him to go around like being weird with animals. But toxoplasmosis is an interesting way to get to let's burn the witches. I love that.
Because that's where like the cats were with the witches.
Right, black cats type shit.
That's probably how that started. Maybe.
The thing about the Romans is I think about the Roman Empire like once a year. But I like to think that they all kept dying so young is because they had like trace amounts of lead in all of their wine containers. So that made them loopy. But another thing is they're soothsayers and saints and like virgins. The smoke that they would be surrounded by was like weed smoke. So they'd just be getting blazed out in the middle of the day, and then Augustus, Julius, Gaius, whatever, would walk up and be like, tell me the good news. And the woman, God bless her soul, would just tell him what he wants to hear because she's stoned. And I think that is a beautiful thing, because if you imagine that every bad decision in history was made up by someone who was on a substance, then it makes the world seem like a little bit better of a place to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so much. I think our whole culture kind of ties in with psychedelics and some kind of drug use, even alcohol, all of it. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that about the lead in the containers, because now they're finding lead in the Yeti containers. And that might be making all of our Yeti cup collectors crazy, because maybe that's what's going on. Oh, everybody's getting so crazy. Maybe we're doing the Roman Empire. We got the Disney Vatican going on. We got the Yeti cups with the lead in them.
History repeats itself.
And that's what podcasts are for, so that you can kind of like see that and go over and see the connections. But it's funny you also mentioned that, and there's a lot of history that dictates that a lot of the Roman and Catholic traditions that made Catholics stand out came during the Crusades, when they started killing the original witches who were using the pagan witchcraft that all of the Abrahamic traditions have been using for hundreds and hundreds of years. They were all using the same witchcraft. It's the white Sabbath and the black Sabbath, the right-hand path and the left-hand path. And there's a story of one of the last witches in that Roman Empire who traveled for days to carry the books of the Sublime. which contained the most powerful knowledge of ancient Hebrew and Abrahamic witchcraft and a little bit of Islamic witchcraft too. Or like Abrahamic, I should say, because Muhammad wasn't around at this time, but there were still his followers. Not his followers, but that sect of people. And she brings these books of Sublime to the last king of Rome, and when he dies, Rome becomes an empire. And the Roman Empire used those books of the Sublime to help them fight off plagues, help them with wars, and build it into an empire. And they used those books all the way until the fall of the empire. When Catholicism started, when Jesus was killed, Catholicism was like, oh, well, this controls people. So let's just use this. Limit it. Put the books in the Vatican or destroy them. Kill all the witches. They're all pretty much dead anyway.
Okay. I want to
research, but it's there.
Everyone do your own independent research. Double-sided, peer-reviewed type things.
It's there.
Okay, I have one more fun story.
Oh, yeah.
So, do you know how BDSM culture was developed in America?
No, but I'm very interested to hear this one, okay?
Okay, so it's post-war America. Mm-hmm. All the boys are coming home. They just fought a war. They just killed so many Germans, Japanese folks, maybe even a couple Russians. Who knows? But the American government has a problem, right? So all of our adult able-bodied men have left for years, right? Who took up like the workforce? Black people and women, right? So you have all these guys coming back over. They're like really repressed. They have a lot of PTSD and they're uneducated. So you give all of the white soldiers and maybe a couple black soldiers the access to education. But the folks that didn't use the GI Bill, right? They were really into mechanical things because a lot of them were technicians. They worked on Jeeps. They worked on motorcycles, right? So they bring this culture of, this is kind of where like automotive culture comes from, kind of, right? So they bring this culture of motorcycles and fixing your own things. But gay people still existed in World War II, mm-hmm. despite what the history books may say. Mm-hmm. So you have these gay mechanics and they're like, okay, we're here, we're queer, and we have our gear. So they start forming these clubs, right? But you can't just openly say, hey, I'm gay and I'm also on a motorbike. They start forming these subcultures and subgroups. And one of them happened to be really into leather play. So that's kind of how you get this idea of bikers and why they wear leather and how BDSM kind of comes off of that, because leather play and BDSM are kind of intertwined within that kind of culture, because you have these gay guys, they're into really kinky sex, and leather is involved because motorcycles. Mm-hmm. So
you got to have leather for kinky sex.
I think that's a prerequisite.
Yeah, it kind of helps with the moisture and everything. But you know, it's really interesting that you mentioned that, and I just wanted to show you this because I know we're probably going to cut it soon. But are you familiar with Little Richard?
I think so.
Yeah, the musician?
Yes, the musician, yes.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I don't get this wrong because I don't want to call somebody the wrong person. But Little Richard, because I just seen something about this the other day, and it actually blew my mind that you brought that up, because I didn't know that about, like, how that all started. That's actually beautiful, man. Let's see. Let me not go in my private browsing.
I've been in a podcast or two.
Well, I don't know if it was Little Richard, but there is... Whoever sings Tutti Frutti, you ever heard that song? Because that song had to be changed. That song's not really what a lot of people think it's about. We're pulling it up, J-Mo.
You need like an audio like
I need
tech
a
person. Yeah, you need a producer.
Oh. But you know, this keeps it real, man. And this makes us reliable. Yeah, that is Little Richard. Okay, so
Okay.
yeah, I got that right. Little Richard sings Tutti Frutti, and he inspired that whole biker culture. You know, Tutti Frutti was about having sex with dudes, and the original, like, it's like so sweet, so juicy, and like the original song was like I was talking about butts and like having sex with dudes, and they had to change it because you can't just make a song about kinky sex, like especially gay sex at this time. You're Little Richard.
Yeah.
They're gonna take you out, man. You're gonna freak out all of these old people. It's gonna you don't even have the internet. You're gonna break the internet before it even starts.
You will
And-
break American culture.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there was so many people who wanted to be like Little Richard, and they were wearing their biker stuff, and they thought it was all cool and the spice. And little did they know, they're dancing to a song that's about gay sex and being a cool gay biker dude. Exactly, like riding that hog, man. And it's like
Riding that hog is crazy, bro.
that's what it was, and
Oh, fuck.
it's just. And I mean, that's another thing. Gay people and women, without them, the world would be kind of boring because we would still just be pillaging and, you know.
Boys will be
Building
boys.
shit.
Boys
Yeah.
will be boys, I guess.
But
No.
what's the motivation if you don't have either one of the things we just talked about?
No, that's valid. That is valid.
So, yeah, man. But I wanted to thank you for coming on the podcast, man. It's
Of
like
course.
you're a perfect first guest. We talked about a lot of good shit.
A lot of
and
funny, weird shit.
awesome shit, man. Like,
Yeah.
thank you so much, buddy. It was good to see you.
Of course. I'm sorry if I'm not going to be fully in the camera. I like to lean back.
It's okay.
But-
Well, we're still learning, but thanks,
It's all
man.
good. Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming.
Is that an hour?